just love this kind of harmony so much. It's probably my favorite, this kind of like jazzy, laid back, everything's extended chords, 9ths, 11ths, 13ths, passing chords, all that. It's just my vibe. So today I'm happy to show you a solid, simple method for developing these kinds of things. It's at least what I use most of the time when I'm doing this kind of work. And it's really based off of a melody. And that's kind of the unconventional approach here, is we're gonna create these chords from a melody. I find I can get consistently great results with this method here, so I think you're really gonna like it. Let's just jump into it and see what it's all about. The first thing we're going to do is get a drum groove going. Believe it or not, even though we're working on chord progressions here, we're going to start with the drums because in this genre of music and all beat-based genres, the drums form such a huge part of the vibe that you want to have that going before you start to write other parts because it's going to shape how you write those parts. So I've programmed my own drum beat here. You could pull in a loop, you could program your own too. If you're looking for some information on how to program realistic sounding drums, I have some videos on the channel you can check out that I'll link down below. Here's what mine sounds like. So it just needs to inspire you, just needs to put you in the groove, in the vibe, get you feeling right. And then when you go to write your melody, you're gonna write into this, and the whole thing is gonna work together all the better because of it. So once you got your groove down, you can move on to the next step. This is probably the most important part of the process, writing the melody. And I want to clarify, when I'm saying melody here, I'm not talking about the lead line for your song or the vocal melody or something like that. Whenever you hear chords, the chords have top notes on them, right? And those will vary depending on the chord. That's what I'm talking about. The melody we're writing here is going to become the top notes of our chords, the top line of our chord progression. We're going to write that first, and then we're going to bring the chords down from the melody. I'm working in the key of A minor today just because it's easy to understand for everybody, but you could do this in any key, of course. I also want to mention that the range where you write the melody is important. You don't want to write down here because then there's no room to put chords, at least not dense chords, underneath. You want to write up in this kind of upper mid-range zone, even up to here if you want, because it leaves a lot of space to put a lot of notes underneath. And to get the kind of harmony we're looking for in this music, we need a lot of space to get all those tense voicings in there. So for writing the actual melody, you're gonna get your drums going first, then you're gonna write a simple, repeating, easy to understand melody over the top. Not something complex and crazy. I mean, you wouldn't wanna do, I don't know, something like, a cool melody, but it's not going to work for this purpose at all. You want something very basic, something very easy to understand, easy to digest for the listener, but maybe is still catchy, right? So that it feels good to listen to, something you could sing, maybe like, I don't know. Or like this. The key words here are simple, singable, easy to understand, catchy, anything like that. I'll show you what I developed for today when I was working on this. This is going to work perfectly for this. It's simple, spacious, catchy, easy to understand. And another important point too is that it's diatonic, meaning it's from the key. I'm in A minor. I'm not using any non-diatonic notes. I'm not using any notes that are outside of the key, and I recommend this to you as well. No matter what level you're at, try writing this melody diatonically. We're going to get the fancy stuff in later with the harmony, but it's nice to have the melody be diatonic and simple, very singable, very easy. Now we need to decide, how many chords do we want? How many chord changes do we want? Do you want to have a different chord for every single melody note or for every other melody note? There's a lot of different ways to go with this. For instance, when I was doing it, I harmonized many of the notes individually with their own chord, but not all of them. It was something like this. Da, 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 da. Could have been simpler. Da, 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 or da, 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 da. In one way or another, every one of these melody notes is going to have a chord under it. It just matters how many different chords. And are the chords going to hit again with the melody note, like stab again? I have these first two notes right here, da, da. We could have a chord that is holding underneath both of them while they change, or the chord can hit once here and hit again here, right? I can have a chord that hits here and holds through these two, or I can have it hit here and then also hit again on these two. I could also have a chord hit here and a different one on this one and a different one on this one. When we get into the actual harmonization process next, you'll see exactly what I mean with this. Let's start putting the chords in now. I'm going to start with a simple example, making the assumption that you don't know too much about harmonic theory and all the fancy chords and all that, and we're still going to be able to make this sound nice. After that, I'll talk about it in the way that I normally think about it with all the theory terminology and harmonic ideas. So for the simple method, you're going to take your first melody note, grab it on your keyboard or just in your MIDI editor here, and you're going to take a bass note from the key, a diatonic note from the key. So I'm in the key of A minor, remember, you could be in whatever. So I could put an A underneath it, E up here, A down here. I could put a D, an F, a G, an E. It doesn't honestly matter right now. You're just going to try something because we don't know yet what the results are going to be. So when I did mine, I ended up with A in the bass. So if I have an A down here and an E up here, I'm just going to start adding in other notes inside. Could be 2 notes, 3 notes, 4 notes, but these notes are going to be diatonic to the key, and I'm just going to start playing random ones until I find a configuration that I like the sound of. So with E in the top, A in the bottom, I just start grabbing notes from the key inside. 2 notes, 3 notes, 4 notes, just experiment. I'm just playing around, listening, changing things. When I find one that I like, say like this, then I'm going to write it in, or I'm going to play it in into the DAW, either way. I don't even have to know what chord that is. I just know it sounds good. I know this bass note with that melody note, these notes in the middle, we like it. Just like this. I grab this first note and I just start duplicating it downwards until I've created the voicing that I found there when I was experimenting. Now I move on to the next melody note and I do the same process over again, but first I have to decide, am I actually changing chords here, or am I hitting the same chord again? Right? I could just straight up take this note and copy the same voicing as the first one, just like this. Or I could grab a whole new chord depending on what you were going for. So for instance, instead of an A in the bass this time, why don't I put F in the bass? And I just start fooling around. I find something like this. I say, hey, I like this one. So now I can input this one. I just look at what notes, I can either play it in or I can draw it in. Now that's not the one I ended up with when I did my original harmonization. I think I was doing something like this. But you see, there's many possibilities. The point is that you're grabbing a melody note, you're grabbing a bass note, and then you're just putting in diatonic notes inside in different configurations, just trying stuff until you find something you like, trusting your ears that if it sounds good to you, it's probably going to end up working. If you don't like something, don't keep it just because you worked hard to get it. Keep working until you have something you like. You're going to repeat this process for each melody note. And remember that you don't need every note to be a new chord. Some chords can repeat twice in a row or 3 times in a row. I mean, we could have the same chord for all 3 of these notes, or this whole bar if we wanted. And there's many ways to do it. Like we could have had it so that, for instance, this one repeats again here underneath this melody note and holds for the length of this. But we could have also changed this one. We could just change a couple of notes even. And then we could shorten these and put some new chords on these two, right? There's so many possibilities to do this. The general idea is that the melody is becoming the chords. The melody's up here, we know it works. We've written it to work, we pull it down, and we're just using notes out of the key, stacking lots of stuff in between to find some cool voicings. What if you know some theory already? What if you have some harmonic theory that you can use here? You should use it. You should use everything that you know, as this is a training ground. This is a good place to learn. It's a good place to experiment and try things out. So some considerations that you could start with would be every melody note is going to be some kind of chord tone, whether that's like a primary chord tone 1, 3, 5 or an extension 7, 9, 11, 13. It honestly doesn't matter that much what it is. You can make any of them work. Any bass note in the key will create some relationship with the melody note, and then you can start thinking about that degree if you can think in that way. If you know it's the flat 6 chord or the 4 chord or whatever, and you want a 9 on there or an 11 on there. So you're considering what kinds of chord voicings, what kinds of chord qualities out of the ones that you're familiar with will work for the emotional vibe that you're trying to go for. Secondly would be inversions and bass movement. So varying your use of root position chords and inversions will create the best result for sure, and also allow you to create smooth bass lines, where before maybe everything is jumping around because you're using roots all the time. On top of that, you can think functionally. So you're thinking about cadences basically inside of the whole melody, inside of the whole progression. You're using secondary dominant chords or passing chords to get you from one chord to another. So for instance, my first chord could be, and it is actually the case here, that this could be some strong chord, this would be a passing chord, and this would be another strong chord. So this is a good way to think as well. If you need some more info on that stuff, I have a whole live stream I did a while ago on passing chords, which I'll link here as well. Having the given melody makes the difference, because then it starts to narrow down possibilities for you. Every time you play a bass note, the melody note is already dictating a kind of extension or chord tone and will push you towards a certain direction. Here's the harmonization that I ended up with when working with this track initially. Let's just listen to the progression first. Now going over a few of these chord choices here. The first one is just the tonic chord, A minor 9. The second one is a C major 9 over E, so first inversion C chord. From the bass up, that's 3, 9, 5, 7, 1, like that. I'm thinking of this basically as a passing chord to get me to this F, because I could tell when I was working on it, I wanted to hear a 1 chord here and a flat 6 chord here. And so bass motion, I'm jumping down to the 5th of the key and then up to the flat 6 here, and I harmonize this. Instead of an E minor chord, I use an inverted C chord. This is an F6 add 9. I could have chosen to keep this extended over, but I liked it being kind of naked by itself over here. Sounds like this. Coming to here, we have a similar melody, but the chords are different. Now we've got D in the bass going to A, landing on G. This is a D minor 9. This is a minor 7 add 11, so no 9 in this chord. And then this is a G major add 11 with a 1, 11, or 4, 5, 1, 3. So we got that like this. Looking at the second half, this first part is basically identical, other than here, the melody slightly changes, and we do that thing where we sustain the chord underneath a note change on top. And then now, again, we're starting the same D, but now instead of A, G, we have G up to A flat. So this is that D minor 9. This is a C major 7 over G. It's not actually a G chord. Again, it's an inverted chord, an inverted C major 7. And it's leading into this guy. And you might have been asking yourself so far, Max, where's all the fancy chords? This neo soul, we want the fancy non-diatonic stuff. Yeah, well, this is it here. So I saved it for now because it's a special point for me. The point is that you want most of the chords to be diatonic. They can be fancy, they can have 9s, 11s, all the cool stuff in them. They can be inversions, you can do voice leading and do all the fancy stuff, but you leave the modal stuff, you leave that kind of out of key stuff out, except for maybe 1 chord or 2 chords. It's because something is special because other stuff is not, in a way. Modal chords get their sound by their contrast from non-modal chords or diatonic chords, right? So you want to keep most of the stuff diatonic and occasionally hit a non-diatonic chord like this one. Now this one here is a B flat 9, so B flat dominant chord in third inversion. So B flat 9 over A flat over its flat 7. And this chord is not a modal chord per se, but more of a cadential chord in the sense that if you were to lead back into the first chord of this whole pattern, which is A minor, you'd probably anticipate it, if you know your harmony, with its 5 chord. You can also use a tritone sub, and that's what I've done here. I've taken the tritone of E, which is B flat, and then I put it in third inversion, so we get this sound, which means that the bass is rising D, G, you could say G sharp, A flat, up to the A. To get these nice non-diatonic chords in there, it's good to know some theory. You can probably do it without. You can probably just take that diatonic note in the melody and then just start trying to add in some out-of-key notes underneath. It's not always going to work though. And if you're new to that kind of thing, it honestly might end in disaster. You're going to have to just try it and see. I hope this has been helpful for you, that you picked up some tricks. If you have any questions or are confused about anything that I talked about today, please let me know in the comments, and also feel free to give me some suggestions for future tutorials or topics you'd like me to talk about. You can also check out the description of this video to find some links there. One's for a Discord server that I run where we talk about music production and theory, and we have weekly production challenges and all sorts of fun stuff. I've also got some courses that I have there on theory and composition if you want to check that out. Otherwise, I hope the information was helpful and that you can write some banging neo-soul chord progressions now and that you enjoy.